session and answer each of those questions at the time. And then we'll also have a general question and answer session at the end. So at the moment, you'll notice you're muted. At the end of the session, if you want to ask questions or want to ask questions during those breaks, just unmute yourself and ask a question. And then if you can put yourself back on mute when we're finished, that would be great. We are filming this session, so I'm assuming most people have got their video off, and I hope no one's got any objection to us filming this, but we're filming it so anyone who can't make it can be sent a copy. I think that's kind of it from me. I'll now probably hand over to George, who should be in control of the slide deck as well. That's a picture of George. So he's a doctor of mechanical engineering. So and he's kind of been leading the scope charge on GEMS, but obviously this is an industry picture of what the requirements of GEMS are as a manufacturer and importer, but also as dealers, consultants, specifiers, etc. Hopefully it's an informative session, and as I said, the more questions we get, the better, and we'll try and answer as many as we can as we go through. So George, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Kerry. Just confirm that you can hear me all right there.
Yep.
All right, that's very good. Thank you. Yeah, so good morning and good afternoon, everyone. So as Kerry said, so I work for Scope Industries, and I've led our GEMS registration program. So so today I'm going to run you through GEMS, broken the presentation down into 4 parts. So in the first part, I'm going to cover off what is GEMS. I'm going to go through things like the regulatory framework, what products are included, talk in detail about the determination, so what's in and what's out, give you a bit of a timeline on GEMS, and then wrap that section up by talking about what happens in the event of non-compliance. In part 2, so I'm going to dive right into the detail of GEMS, so that just focusing on the pieces of information that you'll see when you are looking at GEMS data, so to help you understand what that means and what you should be looking for. Then in part 3, I'm going to show you some example results for some real products, and then in part 4, I'm going to talk about refrigerants. So to jump into it, so so part 1, what is GEMS? So GEMS itself, so GEMS refers to the Greenhouse and Energy Minimum Standard Act of 2012. So that was, I said that was ratified in 2012 in Australia. And what that act has done is it's consolidated all of the state level and national level energy requirements for different products. And it's brought that all under the umbrella of one act. So underneath the Act sits a series of determinations, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So there are a whole series of determinations, and they cover off different types of products. So GEMS isn't just limited to commercial refrigeration. It can apply to things like TVs or microwaves or pretty much any other electricity using appliance. And then underneath the determination sits a series of test standards that the products must comply with. So who's actually involved with GEMS? So there's in Australia, and it sits under the umbrella of the Department of Industry, Science, Energy and Resources. Over here in New Zealand, it sits underneath ECA, and then the regulator across both countries is E3. So E3, they're responsible for administering GEMS, managing the database, managing registrations, and also managing compliance as well. So those are the main bodies that are involved in GEMS. So, what is GEMS for? So the purpose of the GEMS Act is to promote the development and adoption of products to reduce energy use and greenhouse gas production. So when you hear in the news about that we need to reduce CO2 emissions globally, GEMS is one of the tools, or the GEMS Act is one of the tools that the government has implemented to try and drive using more efficient products, which has a subsequent reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. So here and now today, we're just talking about refrigerated cabinets. So just to give you an idea of the scale of refrigerated cabinets. So in Australia alone, in 2015, there are 845,000 refrigerated cabinets. That's enough fridges that you could build a wall around Tasmania. I'm not actually suggesting you do that, but that's a massive quantity of appliances, which is why they want to bring them under much stricter rules to minimize energy consumption. So that 845,000 fridges, that contributes 4% to Australia's total greenhouse gas emissions. So let's give a bit of context around the 4%. So the entire private vehicle fleet in Australia is just over 10%. So those fridges and freezers that are just constantly running quietly in the background are a massive contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. At more of a local level, in a typical convenience store, refrigeration makes up over half of a store's electricity bill. So improvements in the efficiency of product leads to a direct saving in the operational expenses for end customers as well. So the GEMS, as Kerry said, it's the GEMS refrigerated cabinets determination of 2020. So what that is, it replaces the previous refrigerated display cabinets determination of 2012, and it broadens the scope as well to include not just display fridges and freezers, but also a range of other types of products, which I'll talk about shortly. It aligns the testing standards with international standards. So previously we were just pointing to local Australia and New Zealand standards, but now we've aligned those with international standards. And it also introduces the 10-star rating system. So you may be familiar with that if you walk into a typical retail store, that you would see, say, energy ratings on TVs or domestic appliances. So now those ratings will be brought across to commercial refrigeration as well. So what's included? So first up, it's display fridges and freezers. So these have been under some level of control since 2004 in Australia, 2003 in New Zealand. But we've introduced storage cabinets as well. There are literally hundreds of thousands of storage fridges in Australia and New Zealand. There are ice cream display freezers, ice cream scooping cabinets, and small drinks cabinets. So those are the 5 main categories of products that are included. So another thing to note here is it's not just about high volume products. So previously there was a threshold that you had to meet before you had to register products, whereas now, even if you sell one product in Australia and New Zealand, you must register it. You don't need to have tested every product. If you sell fewer than 10 in a calendar year, you can calculate the energy and just register that. But if you sell 10 or more, you must test and register it with no exceptions. By saying no exceptions, there are some products that aren't included under the GEMS determination. So that includes vending machines, ice makers, preparation tables, so your pizza and salad preps, cabinets with water-cooled condensers, built-in cabinets, so those are cabinets that require furniture finishing, roll-in cabinets, pass-through storage cabinets, remote storage cabinets, and specialty storage. So specialty storage is something like a fridge that's specifically designed for storing red meat or something like that. So to go through a bit of a timeline of GEMS. So firstly, the Act was ratified in 2012. Then the refrigerated cabinets determination was released for public consultation at the end of 2018. It was formalised, and it was formalised in August 2019, and it was due to come into effect on the 15th of August last year. However, due to COVID, that was pushed back 8 months to the 1st of May this year. So from the 1st of May this year, to sell a commercial refrigerator in Australia or New Zealand, it must be registered under GEMS. So there was a small overlap period where you could sell down your stock. So if you'd imported it prior to or manufactured it before the 1st of May, you were able to sell it. But from the 1st of May this year, you cannot import product or manufacture product if it isn't registered under GEMS. So E3 have provided guidance around how they are going to address compliance. So their model that they've put forward is firstly to educate, then to monitor, investigate, and then respond. So we are aware that investigations have commenced on suppliers that have no registrations. And in addition to ones that have no registrations, also ones that have, say, 1 or 2 registrations, but continue to sell, say, 100 different types of products. So it's really good to see a strong start on the compliance front from the regulator in this one. So who's actually liable in the event of non-compliance? So, so firstly, and how it's historically been, it's manufacturers and suppliers, but there are provisions within the GEMS Act that mean that retailers and end purchasers are also liable for non-compliance. What's the magnitude of liability? So in Australia, $13,000 per offence, and in New Zealand, $10,000 per offence. ECA in New Zealand have just released, 2 months ago, released a public consultation where they are proposing to provide GEMS inspectors with greater authority and increase that penalty from $10,000 to $25,000 per offence. So as I said, it's really good to see governments taking these really strong and taking these initiatives very seriously. So that covers off part one. Let me know if anyone's got any questions that have come up in the chat, Kerry, or if anyone else has anything.
No questions in the chat at this stage, George. So I'll just encourage people to post those if they have any. Obviously, if they come up with any later on, we can pause at the next section. So subject to none coming in a second, we'll keep going, George.
Sounds good. Thanks, Kerry. Okay, so so part two, the detail. So this is the types of information that I'm going to go through now. This is the sort of stuff that you'll need to be familiar with when you are looking at the results within the database. So whole range of items that I'm going to go through. I'm not going to read them all out now, but it's anything from the product class, climate class, through to the star ratings and so on. So first up, I've got product class. So as I said, there are 5 types of products that are covered by GEMS, but within those there are different variations of products. So they've specified 15 different types, different product classes, so numbered 1 to 15. So under display cabinets, there are 8 different classes. So that's either fridges or freezers, vertical or horizontal, and integral and remote. Under storage, they're either fridges or freezers, or horizontal or vertical, and then under the remaining 3 categories, there's just 1 class under each of those. So you don't have to have memorized all of these, but one of the key takeaways is that you can only compare the results for products within the same class. And I'll show you an example of that in the next part. So the next term that you would see when you're looking within the database, when you're looking at the results, is the climate class. So there are 3 climate classes that are referred to within the GEMS determination, and what that is, it's the temperature at which the product is tested, or the ambient temperature at which the products are tested. So 3 options. So climate class 3, which is 25 degrees, climate class 4, 30 degrees, or climate class 5, which is 40 degrees. So not all of these climate classes apply to all of those different types of products. So for example, display fridges are only ever tested and registered at climate class 3, whereas storage fridges can be tested and registered at climate class 3, 4, or 5. I'll go into that a little bit more detail later on. Next, we've got the internal temperature, or the temperature class. So that's the temperature of the product within the cabinet. So there are a whole range. There's more than what I've listed here. There are a whole range that are available. So you've got either M, L, C, or G. So M being medium temperature, or like a more of a refrigeration temperature. L being low temperature for freezers. C for ice cream, G for gelato. So the ones you really want to be looking for, primarily for display and storage cabinets. So for fridges, you really want to be looking at M1. That's what's required for the storage of perishable products. So that's where that critical 5 degrees temperature comes in. And then for freezers, for the storage of perishable products, you really want to be looking for L1 products. So those are rated to have a maximum internal temperature of minus 15 degrees. So the last 2 items that I've just been through, so the climate class and the temperature class, they combine together into the cabinet's rating. So you'll see that cabinets would have a rating that might look like 5M1, for example. So the first character that denotes the climate class, so remember that's going to be a 3, 4, or 5, so 25, 30, or 40 degrees. And the latter part denotes the temperature class, or the internal temperature of the fridge. So you combine those together to determine the application that you're going to use it for the environment you're going to use it for, and then the what's going to be stored within. So for display products, they report the total display area, or the TDA. So what that is, that's the area of visible product inside the fridge. So it doesn't include, if you can't store product in a particular place, you can't count that towards the total display area. Have seen quite a lot of variation within the registered data, where cabinets that are physically comparable in size have wildly different display areas. So if you are looking at two products that have that physically are the same size but have, say, a 50% difference in display area, it probably the larger one is probably overstating that display area. For storage cabinets, we now have to report the net volume. So previously manufacturers would typically just have reported the gross volume, or the product of the cabinet's internal height, width, and depth. But now you need to report the net volume. So the net volume is a meaningful number. It's the amount of usable storage inside a fridge or freezer. So if you can't store product on the floor of the fridge, or you need to leave particular areas clear for ventilation, that doesn't count towards the net volume. Once again, I have seen where quite a few registrations where simply the product's gross volume has been carried over and used for the registration. So that is one thing to look out for. As with the display area, if you see two products that are very comparable in size, but there's a large disparity in their net volume, it probably does warrant further investigation. Next, we've got the TEC, or the total energy consumption. Simply put, it's the amount of, or the units of electricity that a product consumes in a day. That can be, so one example of that would be, say, 3.48 kilowatt hours per day. That can be used to calculate the running cost of the fridge. So using 30 cents per unit of electricity, and that can vary depending on your energy retailer and where you live. So it could be anywhere from, say, 20 to 50 cents. But just for the purposes of this, so you take the daily energy consumption multiplied by the unit cost of electricity, multiplied by 365, and that gives you your annual running cost of that product. So that is a good point to compare when you are looking at products, to look at their to factor in the running cost as well. So the star ratings, as I said, these are new for commercial. This is new for commercial refrigeration. So it's a 10-star system, or a maximum of 10 stars. The more stars, the better. So energy efficiency is star ratings are proportional to the energy efficiency, and it's calculated based on either display area or net volume, and the total energy consumption. As I mentioned earlier about the different product classes, you can only compare star ratings between the same product classes. Once again, I'll show you an example of that shortly. So just to talk a little bit more about the application of what's just gone to refrigerated display cabinets. So as I said, they're only ever tested and registered at climate class 3, so that's 25 degrees. That's not to say that they can't be used in conditions that are harsher than that, but you must refer to the manufacturer's guidance as to the maximum temperature at which these products can operate. As for their internal temperature, they can be registered to any of the available temperature classes, so that's M1, M2, L1, L2, and so on. But would recommend that you do, certainly if you are storing food in them, that you aim for either M1 or L1, whether it's chilled or frozen. For storage cabinets, however, they can be tested and registered to either climate class 3, 4, or 5. So remembering that's 3, 25 degrees, 4, 30 degrees, and 5 is 40 degrees. So those correspond to light duty, normal duty, and heavy duty. But their internal temperature can only ever be M1 or L1. So food storage cabinets must be able to be demonstrated to be able to hold food safe temperatures at their rating condition. Certainly, you want, as a manufacturer or designer, you want to aim for the maximum level that you can achieve. So there's no disadvantage, say, to registering climate class 5 to climate class 5, as long as you can achieve that. And it very much does come down to the application that you are using the product in. But just say for a typical kitchen, that you would really want to be aiming for climate class 5 products. So next up, we've got MEPS. So MEPS stands for the minimum energy performance standard, and this is essentially the lever that can be used through the GEMS determination to drive up the efficiency of products. So the new determination has brought in new levels that must be met. So just take just as an example, say a two glass door vertical display freezer with a display area of 1.2 square meters. In order to be eligible to be sold in New Zealand and Australia now, that product must use less than 32 kilowatt hours per day. Take a 700 litre vertical storage fridge, that must use less than 4.6 kilowatt hours per day. So what this means in practice is there are a lot of products that are present in the market that do not meet the current that do not meet the new levels that have been introduced. So it is driving either development of products, or products are simply being obsoleted because they cannot meet these minimum levels. So that wraps up that part. Kiri, any questions come through?
Yeah, some quite good questions, George. So I might go through those and some familiar names on those questions. So I'll start with Kathy Goodwin, who's great to see Kathy in the session. Kathy's question is it the responsibility of the purchaser to confirm GEMS compliance?
Yeah, that is a very good question, Kathy. I guess I haven't had that level of specific advice. So I guess when I talked in the previous part around the liability for compliance. So I guess it starts with the manufacturer, supplier, then retailer, then purchaser, and I guess the advice that has been given is the investigations or the response is going to be proportional. So if somebody's buying one fridge, that responsibility is really sitting with the retailer or the supplier. But if somebody's buying 1,000 fridges, then that sits with the purchaser.
And I think typically speaking, things like this would tend to go up the chain, George, from prior experience, that if they're identifying something that they think is non-compliant, and they see it at the dealer level, for instance, they might raise it with the dealer might get a slap on the wrist or a fine, and then it might work its way up to see if that's a product that the importer is bringing in that's actually not certified, and then they'll follow that track. Do you think that's a reasonable assumption?
Yeah, that sounds very reasonable. Okay.
Okay, so another question here from Ty, where do sit in the MEPS framework?
Apologies, Gary, that didn't quite catch that question.
Sorry, Ty's asking, where do blast chillers sit in the framework?
Blast chillers are excluded from this GEMS determination.
Yeah, and I think what we found in George is that the regulators are talking about adding additional products to GEMS in future. Maybe blast chillers may be one of those, we're not sure, but certainly they're talking about ice machines at the moment as a potential future addition.
Yes. So I guess to talk a little bit about the current determination. So they've identified the products that have the greatest impact on the environmental energy use, and that's how they're sort of ordering their way through them. So that's ice makers are one of the ones that are next in queue. So.
Question here from Jaidev, who's from Fiji. So welcome, Jaidev. He's asked, does it apply to end jurisdiction? I assume Jaidev's meaning, is the end user liable for the compliance piece? I
guess similar answer before. I'm not sure in that instance whether that means that the jurisdiction that the product ends in, or whether it starts where it starts. Perhaps. In either case, I guess it's...
Jaidev's there. Maybe if you want to unmute yourself, Jaidev, and we could clarify the question, if you're happy to do that.
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Basically, the question is in regards to end jurisdiction, meaning exports into Fiji. Does that framework carry all the way down, or is it just part of New Zealand and Australia at this point in time?
At this point in time, it's the end location of the product. So it could be sold from Australia into Fiji without necessarily needing to be registered to GEMS, but it couldn't also be sold in Australia.
Thanks, Jaidev.
Okay.
Hopefully that answers the question.
Mm-hmm.
One here from Michael Smart in Queensland. Welcome, Michael. How are dual purpose units, fridge stroke freezer, registered under GEMS?
It's a good, a very protracted debate around one of our combo products. So you can you can register both. So you could register it, say, as a 5L1 M1 product under GEMS, and then it would sit within the class that is at the worst condition, if that makes sense.
I'm not sure that it does to me, George. I'm not sure you can explain it any clearer.
Hopefully that makes sense to Michael. Yes.
So we've had a question from Mark, which I think Jennifer's answered in the chat, which is everyone will receive a copy of the recording. And Mark, and welcome, Mark. Good to see your name on there. He's also asked what the percentage figure is for, I think, in the ambient climate ratings, which I'm assuming is the RH relative humidity figure that he's referring to, George.
You mean for the quantity of registrations or the application?
I think it's in the climate class. Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Yes. So primarily we've seen in storage cabinets, majority are registered for climate class 4 or 30 degrees, but there are plenty of suppliers, including ourselves, that have registered the majority of their products to climate class 5. So you should be able to get products should be available that are in both classes.
Sorry, I think I'm guessing again, Mark, maybe if you want to chime in and clarify that he's also asking about the relative humidity figure on the climate class.
Yeah, that's exactly it, Kerry.
Yep.
Yeah, it's there's two figures. I was wondering if we could clarify what the relative humidity part of it meant.
Oh, sorry. Yes. So those are the specific test conditions. So I didn't talk through them at the time, but so either at climate class 3, that's 25 degrees, 60% climate class 4, 30 degrees, 55% relative humidity, and then 40 degrees, 40%. So those are based on ISO, international standard climate class conditions. So that's, as I said, we've aligned with those different climate classes. So that's where those relative humidity figures come from.
It's a funny one, isn't it, George? Because the higher the temperature goes, typically the relative humidity requirement drops. Yeah,
it does. It's in order of the amount of moisture. So so the numbering system is based on the order of the highest moisture content. So 5 is greater than 4, and so on. Yeah.
And also one last question, I think, in this slot, unless I get another one in the next few seconds. Kelly Lee has asked, if we pass the GEMS certificate energy efficiency label, should we be required to stick this to the actual product?
So no, so commercial refrigeration or refrigerated cabinets, it is not mandatory to display the star ratings like it is on a lot of domestic products.
If you were to want to do that, George, do you have to use an official sticker that you have to buy from someone else, or can you self-print those?
You can self-print those ones. They do provide all the templates required to do so.
Okay, that seems to be the list of questions for the moment. So thanks everyone for your participation so far. That's some great questions there. I'll hand back over to you, George, to keep going.
All right, thanks, Gary. Yeah. So part 3, the results. So all of the results are publicly available. So they are on the energy rating website. So simply navigate to the energy rating website, select the database, and then refrigerated cabinets. And then within there, you can search by either brand or model. So all of the information that I talked about in the last part, that is all publicly available for all registered products. So to look at a couple of examples of results, so these are obviously ones that I'm familiar with. So there's the Scope BME 1200N AC. So that's a class 7 product. So that's a vertical integral display fridge. So it's rated to 3 M1, remembering all display cabinets are rated to climate class 3. So M1 means that's good for perishable, the storage of perishable products. Its daily energy consumption is 3.48 kilowatt hours per day, which corresponds to an annual running cost of $381. Its display area, 1.45 meters squared, and that achieves a 9-star rating. Looking at a storage fridge, so this is a Scope Reflex 2-door under bench fridge. So that's a class 3 product. So that's a horizontal storage fridge. It's rated to 5 M1. So that's the combination of the climate class and the temperature class. So 40 degrees, in a 40-degree ambient condition, that will hold product inside the fridge below 5 degrees. Its daily energy consumption 1.86 kilowatt hours. Its annual running cost of $203 and a net volume of 202 litres, and that achieves 6 stars. So to look at two products that have the same technology but are different classes of products. So on the left we've got a TME 1000, and on the right we've got a Prospect 2-door upright storage fridge. So the class of the products, so the display fridge is a class 7 product, while the storage fridge is a class 9 product. So the display fridge rated to 3 M1, while the storage fridge is rated to 5 M1. So both good for the storage of perishable products. But as far as the registration goes, the storage fridge has been tested and can operate at up to 40 degrees, whereas the display fridge can only ever be registered to climate class 3. That doesn't mean it can't be used above climate class 3. It just means it will only ever be registered at that. So comparable energy consumptions, then comparable annual running costs. The display fridge, obviously it's reporting 1.26 square meters. It's reporting the total display area, whereas 960 liters is the net volume of the storage fridge. But the big difference that arises in the registration, and this is due to the different classes, is the display fridge achieves 8 stars, while the storage fridge, with, as I said, the same technology in it, achieves 3 stars. And it's due to the calculation method for star ratings being different between the different classes of products. So as I said earlier, you can only compare star ratings between products of the same class. So that's all I've got on results. So before I jump into refrigerants, Kerry, have any further questions come up?
Yeah, there's a couple of good questions here, actually, quite specific ones. Again, another one from Kathy. Does the kilowatt usage stroke running cost vary according to the number of door openings?
Yes, yes, it does. Yes, so as far as the registrations go, they should all have the exact same number of door openings, the exact same number of door openings per day. But in reality, the true running cost is going to vary based on the number of door openings that it actually experiences. But as far as comparisons go, you can compare the running costs. Because they've all been tested in the exact same way.
Great, thanks. And there's one here from Scott. To calculate the kilowatt per 24 hours, is there a mandated unit cost like your example prior of 30 cents?
No, so there is no, there's no mandated running cost. There is no mandated unit cost for electricity. That value of 30 cents is a typical value that you would pay. Like I said, it can vary quite a bit depending on your electricity retailer.
That's kind of an interesting one too, George, because I noticed in the back of some of the official documentation from the regulators that they talk about the differences in energy costs in different regions. So I think starting from the low 20 cents up to something like 37, 38 cents in some regions. So if people want to be really specific and they're in a particular region, it's probably worthwhile finding out what the wholesale rate is in that region to calculate the running cost. We just use 30 cents internally as kind of an average or a mean position, not necessarily because that's the actual running cost that a particular user might incur in that region. One here from Trevor. What happens when you add heated doors to a cabinet?
Good question, Trevor. So simply put, the total energy consumption increases. So if you add were to add heated doors to a cabinet, that is the variant that you must test. So you can either have two registrations, one without heated doors and one with heated doors, but you must be reporting the energy consumption for a cabinet with heated doors. Depending on the amount of heat that's added and the type of cabinet, you can have very significant increases in the energy consumption of a product, say even double or triple the energy consumption, depending on the amount of heat put into the doors.
So just confirming that, George. So therefore, you effectively, if you're offering a tropicalized heated door version, you would need a separate listing for that with a separate energy rating.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Thank you. Bruce Cowley, welcome, Bruce. If we test to class 3M1, but sell them as, say, class 5, 40 degrees, does that mean it's essentially self-rated at class 5?
So that you can only do that for display cabinets. You can't do that for storage cabinets. So if you're going to sell them as rated, if you're going to sell a storage cabinet and claim climate class 5, then you must have tested at climate class 5. Whereas for display cabinets, as I said, because they're only ever going to be registered at climate class 3, then the maximum ambient that you're saying it can run in is a self-rating from the manufacturer. Hopefully that answers your question, Bruce.
I think it's a good answer, George. And finally, Ross Wilcox. Hi, Ross. How many door openings per hour are the cabinets tested at, and over what period of time are the cabinets tested?
Yep, very specific question. So yeah, so 6 door openings per hour, 6 seconds per door opening for a display fridge, 7 seconds for a storage fridge. If it's a display fridge or freezer or a storage fridge, the doors are opened 6 times an hour for 12 hours. If it's a storage freezer, the doors are open 6 times an hour for 4 hours, closed for 4 hours, and then 6 times an hour for another 4 hours. Hopefully you caught all of that.
Yeah, hopefully you're happy to ask that question, Ross, because there was a lot of detail there. And well done for answering it, George. It's very impressive. Okay, I think that's it for the questions for the end of that session. So kick on, George. Thanks.
Thanks, Kerry. Yeah, so part 4, refrigerants. So just to be very clear, so there is no requirement for the refrigerant within the GEMS determination. It's external. There are external requirements such as the Kigali Agreement that are driving requirements around refrigerants. So refrigerants are very it's very important to talk about refrigerants. We've obviously had quite a tumultuous century when it comes to refrigerants. So using CFCs, finding out they're destroying the ozone, then switching to HCFCs, then HFCs, then HFOs, no UFOs. And then now we're more in the age where we're transitioning to natural refrigerants. In any case, just to talk a little bit about the phase down of refrigerants. So for those of you that aren't familiar, so it's the Kigali Agreement. So what that is we looked at the government's looked at how much refrigerant was used between, I think, 2011 and 2015, and then we from 2018 and 19, that's being incrementally phased down over the next decade. So right now we must be using, and according to the Kigali Agreement, we must be using 90% of that previous benchmark, but that will drop down to 15% over the next course of the next decade. That's having obviously an associated impact on price. So this is our price history of for R404A. So a very common refrigerant used in freezers. So back in 2009, we were paying under $20 a kg. You'll buy that same kg now, you're looking at around $300 per kg. I'm not suggesting anyone invest in refrigerant, but this is just showing the impact that the phase down is having on the cost of refrigerant. So to look at a real application, so this is a 2-door upright freezer. So the different types of refrigerant options that are available for it. So as an HFC, R404A, so we use a kg of R404A, and we use a kg of R452A, which is just a drop-in synthetic replacement for R404. Or that same appliance can be run on 100 grams of R290 or propane. So what's the environmental impact? And that's measured in the equivalent amount of CO2. So that 1 kg of R404A, it's equivalent to just shy of 4 tons of CO2. So that's a phenomenal amount. I think you can drive across Australia and back 3 times is how much you need to do that to emit that same amount of carbon. R452A, so that's just over 2 tons of CO2. So it is a good reduction. There is no reason why anyone should be putting R404A into new equipment now, when they do have these other synthetics that have a much lower GWP. But the future of refrigerants being natural refrigerants, that 100 grams of R290 has the equivalent global warming potential of 0.3 of a kg, so 10,000 times less than its 404A equivalent. So natural refrigerants, they are very good. So when I'm talking about natural refrigerants, I'm talking about hydrocarbons. So they have no ozone depleting potential and ultra low global warming potential. So very good environmentally. Longevity, so they're very available. They're here to stay. As we've seen over the last couple of decades, we've had these rapid changes in the types of refrigerants being used, but the outlook for natural refrigerants is very good. So essentially a stable type to be using. They are low cost, so they're significantly cheaper. As I said, it's $300 per kg for R404A now. It's only sort of in the dollars for the same amount of R290. There's they are also efficient. So at least in the products that I've been part of the development of, we've been able to achieve better efficiency, therefore for better GEMS ratings when we're using natural refrigerants too. And lastly, the hydrocarbons are non-toxic as well. So very good refrigerants. Obviously, when you talk about natural refrigerants, they are R290 and R600. They are both flammable refrigerants. However, this flammability risk can absolutely be addressed. So there's a lot of documentation that's available. There's a lot of other certifications that are available that can ensure that they are used safely. But in short, it's about using them in your products. The designers need to be ensuring that that is considered as part of the design. So so there aren't any sparking, any ignition sources within the product themselves, and also there are very strict limits on the amount of refrigerant that can be used. So you can only use 150 grams in a single refrigerator. So it's equivalent to a few cigarette lighters worth of refrigerant. And they are safe if handled correctly. So just to talk a little bit around that, like what would actually servicing a refrigeration system with natural refrigerant. So this is servicing it on site. So when it is in situ. So you'd need to isolate out the area, ensure that there's a 2-meter exclusion zone around you. It has good ventilation. You need to have removed any potential flammable materials. Obtain a hot works permit if you are doing any gas work, and then use a gas detector. The alternative, which is obviously a very common option, a more common option now, is that the refrigeration systems are all self-contained, so that they can be replaced on site without having to go through all of the components on the left, and then taken back and worked on in a workshop that's designed for that type of work. So that's all I've got on refrigerants. So I guess if anyone's got any questions at all.
Yep, I've got some more here, George, and you'd be surprised that Kathy Goodwin's come in with another one, which means at the moment she's leading the lead table on questions, so I'm not sure what the prize is. Is there any specific policy on phasing out R404A?
Yes, so that is 404A, R134A, that is included in the phase down. So that is included in that goal to get down to 15% of our previous levels within the next decade.
Is there an acceleration process on the worst ones like 404A, George?
They all sort of sum together based on their total impact. Yeah.
Yep. Thanks, Kathy, for your questions. It's great to have your contribution. She's also saying you're entertaining, George.
Thank you, Kathy.
Be appreciative of. Jackie Derbyshire in New Zealand. So I got a New Zealand question. Congratulations, Jackie, first one. How do you differentiate between a RDC, or the refrigerated display cabinet, and a drinks fridge class? It's a very good question, actually.
Yeah, no, that is a good question. So a drinks fridge. So the definition of a drinks fridge is that's designed solely for the storage of storage and sale of non-perishable drinks. So that you'll only ever see those ones rated to M2 or 7 degrees. So for this, storage and display of non-perishable drinks only. So that is a drinks fridge. Whereas a display fridge, the definition of that is it's for the storage and display of foodstuffs and access to by the end customer. That's the definitions of those two. So.
Cool. Bruce Cowley again. Has or when will the charge limit rise?
That is a great question, Bruce. So there has been discussion for the last, I think it's been ongoing for about 4 years now, of increasing it to just under 500 grams. I haven't seen anything come through that's actually been material saying this is when it will change. It's essentially that charge limit staying at 150 grams has really driven a lot of development in that space. There are products that I've been part of working on that we never thought from the outset we were going to be able to achieve it within the charge limit, but we've just crossed off a lot of those bigger products recently. So that has driven some good development, keeping that limit low.
Great. Thanks, Brian Garcia. I think is that our first WA question for the day. Welcome, Brian. With propane, is there a maximum total of refrigerant over multiple units in one site or area?
Yes, it's based on the volume of the room. I don't know that ratio off the top of my head, though. Sorry, Brian.
Come on, George. You can't go into this without knowing the answer.
Yeah. So yes, it is down to but it is because of the charge limit is so low. It is very it would have to be a very, very small room for that to be an issue.
Cool. We've got another one from WA in quick succession. This one from Arcus. Can you talk a bit more about custom products?
Yes. So as far as I guess, have you got any sort of specific questions on that? Is it?
It's a general question from Arcus. I'm assuming it's around the requirements for GEMS on custom products relative to the old MEPS on custom products, George.
Yeah. So as I said, so previously, I can't remember what the previous limit was. I think it was 25 per year, but you didn't have to register the products. But now, even if you do a one-off sale of a custom product, if it does fall under one of the GEMS categories and it's not exempt for some reason, you must do a low sales volume registration. So that requires you to essentially fill out a spreadsheet with the components that use electricity, so whether it be fan motors, lights, the compressor, and so on, and then just register that information. It's free to register. It doesn't take very long. It's just part of that recording process to ensure that even the low quantity, low sales volume products are being captured within the database.
I think that answers it, because they've come back and said, yes, we build one-offs. What are the requirements? I think you've answered it there, George.
Yep.
Here's a beautifully worded question from Ty, which he has called a noob question, I am sure. Not exactly sure what noob means, but
I'll explain to you later, Gary. No worry.
Thanks, George. A bit too old for noob. Where do we undertake the certification, and is it independent testing or self-reported?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in the first instance, all testing is it's self-tested and self-reported. However, there is a check testing program. I read in the explanatory note they have provision for 30 check tests per year is what they have. And then, what was the first part of that question there, Kerry?
Where do we undertake the certification?
Yep. So all the information that you would require, you'd be able to find that on the energyrating.gov.au website. That should steer you through getting an account created and access to the required portal.
This one is from Martin. It says it's about consultants. I'm assuming it might be Martin Chris, but I'm not sure. But if it is, welcome, Martin. What tools / consultants are available to importers to assist us in gaining certification of products?
Once again, there are plenty of resources within the energy rating website that would step you through. So that would give you access to, or at least the determination itself. You do need to purchase the standards yourself, but all of the information should either be should be available through the energy rating website.
Yeah, there's a comment here from Pat Milliken, which is a useful one, which says visit the ARA website. They have some free and very informative documents around safety of flammable refrigeration or refrigerants, which is, I think you had a screenshot of the cover of one of those documents on the presentation.
Yes, yeah, very good source.
Yeah,
ARA.
So he's actually, thanks Pat for including the link there to ARA as well. I'm happy for anyone, if they haven't already, as one's popped up, GEMS testing facilities in NZ and AU.
I'm not familiar with the testing facilities that are used by the regulators.
Yeah. I mean, typically speaking, there are test labs, obviously, with multiple certifiers for other things. They may well have testing facilities for GEMS, I'm assuming. Probably best going down that track. Yeah. And what else have we got here? Glenn, why are requirements separate for Queensland? Question.
I'm guessing you're talking about the Queensland gas certificate. There. I think
it would be, yep.
Yeah. I'm not sure you'd have to ask the Premier of Queensland. Yes, there are still some state level requirements, and Queensland gas certificate being one of them. Yes.
Is that the only one, George? You're aware of?
It's definitely the one that takes the longest to come back. So that's why I'm familiar with it. Yeah.
And that's effectively a register of hydrocarbon appliances, isn't it? That are used in the state for sale.
Yes. Yes. But the overarching compliance standard for the plug-in equipment is the ASNZS 60335. So that's the appliance standard that you need to meet with these products. But yes, the Queensland gas certificate is in addition to that.
Cool. I mean, there aren't any more questions on the chat, George. I'm not sure if anybody else has any questions they want to ask via the microphone, if they're shy of typing. I'll just open that up as well if they want to unmute themselves. At the moment, doesn't seem like anyone is. I thought it might be useful, George, quickly, we've got a few minutes left. You talked about, obviously the intent with GEMS is to lower carbon emissions, which is good for the planet. You talked about the importance of the natural refrigerant alone in terms of lowering that GWP, or global warming potential. But what we found, and I think probably other manufacturers found too, is using natural refrigerants actually makes a more energy efficient appliance, typically when it comes to refrigeration. Fair comment?
Yeah, absolutely, Kerry. That's true, and because it's because of the longevity of the refrigerant. So the compressor manufacturers are seeing this as I guess a long-term refrigerant. They are also pouring a lot more into the development there. So there's lots of areas that are being, because it's seen as a stable long-term solution. Just the products are getting better and better, the component supplies are getting better and better. So
typically speaking, there's less heat load as well from the refrigeration system, meaning there's overall less potential heat load on the mechanical system.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I mean, it's when talking about energy efficiency, it's a system as a whole. So there's the efficiency of the refrigeration system, but there's also the heat load side as well. So yes.
Cool. Well, it seems like the questions have dried up, George, which but it was a very healthy conversation. Michael Smart's hit us with one late one just in time. How are these regulations being policed at a customer level, manufacturer importer level, to protect the reputable companies following the correct process as opposed to some of the others? Pointed question there from Michael, I think.
Yeah, so that does come down to the to E3, who are, as I said, they are responsible for regulating the scheme. So they have a compliance team. It's not just one person. They have a team of gyms inspectors, I think they're called. So they're responsible for I guess for monitoring the market. It's based on a combination of their own investigations and any submissions that people might make to them about instances of non-compliance. So that's in Australia, and as I said, there are in New Zealand in the jurisdiction there. So that's managed by ECA as well. So yeah, it's good to see there is actually quite a bit of resource behind the compliance side as well now.
I'd just like to thank Chris Slater for the comment there. He suggested we could employ the Victorian Police as an enforcement regulation there. Might get a bit more uptake. A few more questions have actually come in, George. I mean, we just had a late surge. With self-regulation, did you mention that there will only be 30 spot checks?
Per year was that's what they provisioned for that. That's 30 products. So yeah. There's also you must as part of as manufacturers, you must provide your it is all kept it's all kept private, but you must also provide your sales data as well as part of this too. So yeah.
Cool. Now I'm just trying to sort out the comments from the questions here. Are there consultants who can assist importers and manufacturers? I'm assuming with gyms.
Yeah, I guess Kerry, I'll probably ask you that question.
Yeah, I don't know the answer.
Okay.
I just go to you, George. I'm sure there are out there. Unfortunately, we're probably not the best people to ask who they might be. Sorry about that. Maybe you could start with the GEMS regulators yourself if you're interested in the GEMS, or some specialists in compliance that are independent. Okay, I'm just going down. There is a question from Chris Love. Welcome, Chris. Good to see your name there. Interested in your opinion on the future benefit of remote refrigeration plant in line of this. Great question.
Yeah, that is a really good question. I was asked that question about 12 months ago, and the response that I gave at the time was, I guess it really depends on the reason that somebody's installing a remote refrigeration system. So say, I mean, different reasons for installing remotes, whether it's that you don't want to have such a high load on your air conditioning system. However, with products becoming so much more efficient now, that load's decreasing anyway. Sometimes it's for noise, so you want to remove all those noise generating components outside of your venue. However, once again, the products are becoming quieter again. So it really depends on the driver for why you want a remote system anyway. So hopefully that answers your question in part there, Chris.
If Chris wants to chime in, he's welcome to. In the meantime, I'll just ask Bruce Cowley's got another question there. He's catching up with Kathy Goodwin in terms of questions. You might want to get in quickly. Bruce, can you talk a little more around heat rejection? Do you have a rough % in decrease?
Straight proportional to the amount of to the TC, Bruce. So as far as heat rejection goes, and that's the average heat rejection. So if you halve the TEC, then you've halved your load on your air conditioning system. So once again, with these increasing or this improving energy efficiency, you would expect to see also significant improvements or reductions in heat rejection.
Jaidev's put a comment in. With heat rejection, can cogeneration designs may be an option in future? I'm not sure I personally understand.
It very much depends on your application. Yeah, very much depends on your application. Yeah, I guess say for a typical fridge, if its heat rejection is say 500 watts, I guess it depends what you want to do with that 500 watts. But yeah, that is a good question. Yeah.
Well, I think that's it for the questions. A few comments coming in, which I won't read to you, George, because you'll get a swelled head, but I think you've done a very good job. What I will just quickly touch on as we close here is the next webinar, which is NAFES webinar. That's on the 11th of November. So about a month away at 11:30 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. You'll get the typical invites again. and that's being presented by Paul Bainey of Comcator. It's the latest on electrical, gas and watermark certification, so another standards conversation. Obviously quite dry subjects, but hopefully today's been informative and useful to you all. Hope to see you again. We had a record number of dial-ins today, which is great. So hopefully we get that again next month when Paul's presenting. Thanks very much, George, for taking the time to do this out of your busy day. Thanks also to Jennifer from NAFES for organising the event, and thank you for all the delegates for both attending and participating. A really positive session, I think. Thank you, and take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.